So, Stacy, I'm curious in terms of just leadership style, especially with middle managers, how important it is to, cultivate that within any industry when you're really trying to scale a company.
Great question. I would say it's incredibly important. I think having intentionality around your leadership style is quintessential to your success. As a matter of fact, that's actually what our name Consilio was born from. It actually stands for on purpose and with intent in Latin, because we really believe that intentionality is how you create your success on purpose. And your leadership style is where it all begins. And, we always say, look, you have a style, whether you like it or not, is a different story. And whether or not it produces the results you desire, that's a different story, but you have one. And so the quicker you own it and have intentional activities towards cultivating it the way you want it to be, the better off you'll be. So for example, we always kick off with a personal brand is where we start a lot of our coaching, is really understanding who do you want to be? How do you want to be perceived out there on your team and in the organization and even amongst your clients? So, we've got four disciplines of success, of high performance that we operate from. The first one is mindset. What's your mindset? How do you want to think about yourself? How do you want others to think about you? Your skill set. What skills do you have? And what do you need in order to be successful? How well do you execute those skills? I'm sure you might appreciate, Alex, that knowing what to do and doing it can be two very different things sometimes, right? So you have to really be able to break those down. And then the fourth one's relationships. Like what are the relationships that you cultivate? Are you influential to them? And are they helping you to get to where you need to go? And so again, your leadership style is going to directly impact your ability to be able to positively affect the outcomes for your organization and ultimately achieve the goals that you strive for.
I love that mindset, skill set, execution, and relationship.
Yeah.
And I personally love execution because, you would hope to have the right mindset going into it, and you would hope that your skills are on point, but really being able to execute and having that drive to push your team forward. There's always going to be some kind of low hanging fruit somewhere in the organization to really evaluate that and really execute that. I love that
Well,
philosophy.
and what's interesting is when we find people are struggling to execute, you can actually go look at the other three elements, right? When somebody is struggling to get something done, the first thing we ask them is like, well, what's your mindset about that task, that situation, that person? Do you think that they're part of the problem, part of the solution, right? So how are you perceiving it going in? And then number two is like, what's your skills? Do you have them? Are they robust enough? Are they refined? Have they progressed with you? Or are you still operating with the same skill set that you had in high school or college, or you just having graduated? Where are you at in that scale? And then lastly is relationships. How are you leveraging the people around you to actually get what you need and to be able to move forward? And sometimes it's, are you getting the kick in the tail you need, right? Are you getting the accountability and the support in order to get things done? So really, it's like you kind of start to see how well they all dovetail together. That's why we often represent them with an infinity loop in between them, because you're constantly circling between all four of those things all the time.
I love that, having that systematic approach and having an accountability partner too. I think that's so important.
Huge.
I love how you dove into that. But I
Mhm.
want to pivot a little bit. So obviously, as a master of practitioner of NLP, and a student of the art of negotiation, I'm curious, Stacy, how have these skills really influenced your approach to leadership and helped you guide others in your organization towards success?
Great question. I use those skills every single day. If you haven't read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, I highly recommend it. And he talks a ton about how, the most important negotiation is the one you don't even know you're in. And I find that every single conversation is a negotiation, whether it's negotiating with my 16-year-old to get his chores done and to get his homework done, or whether it's negotiating with the CEO of a client of mine, or anybody on my team. It's always about how do I influence their behavior? Not how do I manipulate, but how do I positively influence them to take action or to see a different perspective, so that they can change the way they look at things. Wayne Dyer taught us, change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so again, as we start to think about this idea of how do you influence, that's where the neuro-linguistic programming, the NLP, comes in. And really the core of that is you have to have first respect for the other person's view of the world. And I love that because the training there has taught me never to see the other person as broken, never to see the other person as wrong, always to be open and curious to their ideas and what they have to say. And I would tell you, that has dramatically changed my relationships.
Completely agree. And it's like, from a manager perspective, always kind of having that open door policy and really allowing people to thrive and bring out the best in their skills and allow them to come to you for advice or questions or anything that they might be struggling with. And that's going to really let you cultivate success within different organizations.
Sure.
Yeah, so I want to elaborate too, on communication. We've talked a little bit about it. A lot of this is touching on great communications, and that's so important in any organization. So how can implementing the DISC assessment within a company really improve communication across all levels and ultimately lead to more productivity and helping teams?
Well, personally, I'm a huge DISC fan. And the reason being is because it's the only observable language that's out there. Meaning, you and I could go to the mall, if they still have those, and we could sit down and we could watch people walk around. We could watch them drive and park. We could watch them eat. And we could reasonably start to discern what their natural personality styles are. And once we know that and we can see that, then we can start to adjust our behaviors and our personality to be a bit more like theirs. One of the reasons why that's important is because relationships aren't 50-50. They're 100-100. It takes both parties coming all the way to the table to do their part. And that's really what DISC challenges us to do, is it challenges us to see ourselves really clearly, who we are, how we behave, what makes us tick, where our opportunities are for improvement, all that fun stuff. But it also helps us to start to see other people. And when we can really have that awareness of others, then we can actually start to regulate our behaviors, our word choice, our body language, our tone. And the whole purpose of that is so that we can show up in their preferred style. I'm sure you've heard the phrase birds of a feather flock together.
Oh, yeah.
And why do they do this? It's because there's safety in sameness. The more we're like each other, the more safe we feel. When there's psychological safety, then we're more vulnerable, we're more open, we're more receptive. And so the whole point of DISC is to decrease resistance and increase receptivity. It's the ultimate rapport builder. And so again, the idea is, how do you go from the golden rule, which is treat others as you would like to be treated, to the platinum rule, which is treat others as they would like to be treated? That's really the whole point. And the DISC framework teaches us how to do this in spades. And so you can do it internally with your team, and you can certainly, once you start to see the styles, you can do it in a phone call, in an email. So now you can start to influence vendors and prospects and clients and all these folks that maybe had never even taken the report before. So that's why I really love it. And I do offer a free DISC report for anybody who's interested in taking one. Just it's on my website. So.
Yeah, I definitely encourage to check that out because I think it's so important to understand how other communities communicate, other teams, and have the right tools in place. That's going to really help you expand, and it's going to improve your overall performance personally, but also collaboratively with your team. And like you said, two birds flock together. Like that old saying is so true because we ultimately are going to lean on to what we're most comfortable with and who we can relate with the most.
That's right. Yep. And that's where your influence lies.
Exactly. And that's how you can really level up and really kind of bring out the best in others too. So love it.
Yeah, for sure.
But obviously Consilio, it's known for world-class coaching, training, AI sales, practice portal. Can you share some of those insights on how these resources have really helped other organizations achieve their their corporate objectives and really execute strategies.
No, I appreciate that. I'm going to go back to our name in Consilio. It's all about intentionality. And I would tell you that's what our training and coaching is all about, is how do we create that self-awareness and then create ownership, accountability, responsibility so that we can take new actions. With new actions, new outcomes. And so we do a combination. I think what makes us different and why our clients tell us that they have such amazing results is because we have essentially a three-pronged approach. Number one is we do the training. So we teach the content, we get it out there. We do it in a fun, engaging way. We've got a fantastic discovery process that we learn all about your organization. So it's really customized. And we meet the people on your team where they are instead of just an off-the-shelf program. And so that training is step number one, but we don't stop there. In order to really create retention and adoption of the tools and the strategies, we move into coaching. And coaching is where we get a chance to really work with folks one-on-one or in small groups. So in our sales trainings, we'll do things like six-legged coaching, where we watch your manager coach a direct report, and then we're in the room too. So there's 6 of us in the room, and we're able to see a live coaching interaction. What we find in coaching, especially in organizations, is that there's very little time spent on skill development, practice development. They might come into the meeting and say, we need you to sell more of this, or we need you to stop doing these things. But there's no really information on how to do that. And that's where we stop the process and we say, let's back up and make sure we understand how to do that. So we've got a 5-step skills transfer process, a 4-step goal setting meeting, a 5-step vision to reality process. Everything we do is broken down into steps that can be repeatable. And then we teach them with such rigor that they're really committed not only to memory, but they can go and apply them. And then the third step is really what you talked about, that AI component, where we have an AI tool where people go in and practice. So they can actually go in and practice these skills with an AI that's going to give them feedback on eye contact, filler words, empathy, influence, attitude, all these things that come through in your speaking that are really important to be influential, again, to help the other person take some new action. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, right? And maybe even ourselves take some new action. So this is kind of, I think, our trifecta of how we're so powerful, is really working those things together. And we've actually had some statistically proven research done that shows that when you do these 3 things together, you have an exponential return on your investment. And that's what ultimately, at the end of the day, that's why people do training and coaching, because they're looking for new results and they're looking for, new behaviors.
Definitely. Yeah. The ROI is so important to see that metric. And I love how you talked about how you guys are utilizing, AI within your company and having that as a practice portal. It's super interesting. And it makes me wonder why other companies aren't starting to jump on that because yeah, it's eventually, because that's how the world is going, especially in tech. And I love how that, is a tool that can be executed so efficiently within your organizations.
Well, it's sports at its best, right? I'm sure I've got some sports fans out there. I'm a baseball mom. And so I know that you don't win baseball games without men on base and without repetitions at the plate, right? And some of our best baseball players that have made it into Hall of Fame, I got a 394 batting average, which means they hit less than 4 times out of 10 when they were at bat. But they were at bat 10 out of 10 times. And that's what our programs are designed to do, is to get you those at bats, get you those repetitions, so that when you are in the game, you have the best version of yourself showing up, right? So it's not just knowing what to do, but it's being able to do it. And then it's being able to do it in those high pressure moments that matter most: knowledge, skill, mastery. That's what we take you through.
Exactly. That's why, yep, that practice is so important, especially like in sports. So when you get to that
Yes.
game time situation, it's the long hours of the repetition. I played baseball my whole life too, so I exactly relate. All the years of pitching and training and doing the little things that you think don't matter, they add up in game time situations. So love that analogy. But so obviously, many companies, Stacy, obviously struggle with having difficult conversations with their employees, and I think that can really hinder growth internally. So I'm curious, how can leaders really overcome this challenge, create a culture that really encourages open, honest dialogue? I know we touched about it with the DISC method, but is there any other specific ways or strategies you could give?
Yeah, for sure. So the first one that I would say is, do you have core values and do they expect that people communicate? That first startup that I talked about working at, we had a core value called open communication. And we were expected right upon new hire to give and receive difficult feedback every single day, every single week. And they taught us how to do it. They gave us, actually a step process on doing it. And it was expected of us. So even today, we've got a core value that's called fruitful communication. And we expect everybody in our organization to give and receive feedback and to communicate openly all the time with the end in mind of producing ROI, producing fruit, getting somewhere positive. And so I think number one is, do your core values expect that people do that? And with that as well, do they expect that people constantly get a little bit better, Kaizen, that constant and never ending improvement? I can take any one of your core values. They don't even have to say communication as the primary word, but I'm sure I can nest that observable behavior underneath any core value. So reach out if you have a question on how to make it work in your core values. I'm happy to answer that question for you. So that's
Mhm.
number one. Number two is pacing the conversation. Here is why most conversations become difficult, is because the person who initially has the thought, feeling, or issue with what's happening decides at some point along the way it's not worth talking about yet. They get busy, the person's on vacation, they forget about it, they're too busy to stop themselves. And before you know it, 1 or 2 or 3 weeks has passed and they think to themselves, oh, it's not important to have this conversation. It's already in the past. No reason to do it now. And so all they do is kick the can down the road. And what happens is this happens 2, 3, 4 times. And before you know it, it's now a big thing that needs to be addressed. And that is what makes it difficult. The other person has no idea that this is a problem. And so if you pace the conversation, which means pacing it along the way, as you have thoughts and feelings, you need to be communicating them and do that all along the way. I was just coaching with a client here recently where she promoted a gal up. She's going to be she's going to be overseeing a couple of her other friends. And so there's discomfort already with knowing she's going to have difficult conversations with her friends at some point. There's going to be something that pops up. And I said, well, why don't you have her go and preempt that? Go and talk now about, hey, I know I'm going to have difficult conversations at some point. I know I'm going to have to share an alternate opinion or perspective with you. Let's talk about what that's going to be like now and how we want to show up in those moments before there's the emotion involved. And let's start to set some ground rules about how we want to do that. And the whole goal here is to be preventative and to actually preempt that difficultness, which is the emotion, and have that, preset that out early. So pace the conversation, expect that people do it, and actually get in there and preempt what you will ultimately happen. If you're going to have a long-term relationship, and I mean anything longer than a few days, you're going to have a difficult conversation at some point. So
Yeah.
lay out the ground rules early.
I love it. It's so true. And we're all humans. We're all emotional at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
I think, ways to, like you said, prevent that from ultimately blowing up is really just over communicate. I don't think there's such thing as over communicating. I think you just communicate, see ahead, plan out the vision, the future, and find, opportunities where there might be some conflict, um, you know, down the line, whatever project or whatever you're working on in your organization, and plan for that. So you said, really hash that out early on, before the emotions, intact.
We'll take the marketing and advertising approach, right? How many times does McDonald's tell you about their specials or run their commercials? Just once? Just
No,
twice? No, like
they pound you.
they pound you with it, right? Dun. Like, I mean, it's like that doesn't come with just the first 1 or 2 times. So I do have to chuckle sometimes when people say to me, well, I sent them an email, and I'm like, ooh, you sent them a whole email one time? People need repetition in order to retain it. So I love that. Yes,
Yep,
repeat it often and you can't over communicate.
definitely. Yep, just like in sales, the follow up is so important. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
I want to transition. How can organizations really foster continuous learning and development? That's so important in any industry, any company. But how have you really fostered continuous learning within your organization?
Well, it's actually part of our core values again. So we have congruent vitality is one of our other core values. And what that talks about is that we live congruently. We pursue our passions often. We constantly refine and develop our skills. We make it a habit to be congruent and practice that way. So I really go back to these core values are not just words on a wall. They're actually governing bodies of how we behave. And so really set that out in your organization early, teach that to everybody in their onboarding, and then use it as part of your hiring process. You have people give you examples of where they've demonstrated that in their life so that you can see that as part of their nature, kind of who they are. And then I think having a budget internally that looks at, we talk about, upskilling, reskilling, retention budgets. And what I mean by these are opportunities to be investing in your key people. How do you invest in your A players so that they stick around? How do you invest in your B players so they become A's? How do you invest in your C's so they become B's? And how do you promote your D players to your competitors, right? Let them be their profit margin drain. When people see you taking that seriously, they start to take their role seriously, and then they'll start to come to you with these questions of, hey, how can I get better at this? We actually have a tool that's called the performance progression plan, and we work on this with a lot of our clients to create, what does it look like to be foundational in the role? What does it look like to be advanced? What does it look like to be best in class? And when we lay that out for them, first of all, your salary range can go right around this. So that's super cool. Now, when people come to you for money, you can go, well, let's take a look at the performance progression plan and see where you lay in relation to that. And it makes a lot more sense. It makes it much more black and white. But then also, as you start to say about, here's what it looks like to get to advanced at this skill or at best in class, they start coming to you and saying, hey, I want to take this new training. I want to be able to get into this next level. What do I have to do that? And that's when you know you've won, when they're coming to you and actively seeking that out. And so when you don't see that, that's again an indication of what level player you have on your team.
Definitely. I love how you measure that performance progression plan. And that's such a great assessment or tool to really figure out where that person is on the scale. And like you said, if they're a deep player, recommend them to a competitor. And sometimes you have to make those tough decisions. I actually had a mentor who said something really similar recently. So I love that approach and mindset.
Yeah, for sure.
But on more of a future goals and aspirations standpoint, obviously as a CEO, I'm really curious. I want to know, some of the goals that you envision the company moving forward, in the next couple of years, whether that's solutions or who your client base that you're planning on serving in the future. If you want to just touch on that a little bit.
So we've got a vision, a big, hairy, audacious goal to have 1 million people Consilio certified. And what that means to us is that 1 million people having been touched with how to do these communication behaviors and skills, how to actually go out and live Consilio on purpose every single day. And we feel like if we can actually touch 1 million people, then that in the pond, we get to be the ripple. Because these folks, then what we found is that this communication training, it doesn't just affect them at work, it affects them at home. And when you affect their home lives, it affects their communities. When you affect their communities, it affects their entire environments, and it stretches out really far. And so, yeah, we do have a bit of, kind of a Pollyanna sort of view on things. And we really want to eradicate miscommunication. That's our vision. So our vision is to eradicate miscommunication from the planet. We envision a world where people speak their intention and the other person sets down the delivery they don't like and they tune in to hear the message. If we had more people communicating that way, where would we be? You look at social media and some of the things right now, the vast majority of the disagreements are rooted in misunderstandings. And all of that comes in how we talk. Body language, tone of voice is 93% of communication. Our words is 7% of communication. Yet that's what most people focus on, what I'm going to say. They very rarely focus on how I'm going to say it. And when we start to shift our thoughts there and our approach, then we can have profound effects on our families, our loved ones, our colleagues, our clients. I mean, we really can make a difference.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, only 7% is what we actually say. that's it's nuts because it's so important, especially for anything, going to negotiate a salary or going to have a tough meeting with a client. The way you approach yourself, how you carry yourself, how you walk into a room, and how you give a presentation, whatever that is so important, and it can really change the tonality of that. So
Yeah,
I love that. But I have one more question, and then I'll leave a little bit of time for some rapid fire questions, and then we can wrap up. So, obviously, you've built a thriving organization over the years, Stacy. But on a more personal note, I want to know, how you've been able to balance your professional success with your family life, and what strategies or practices have really kind of helped you maintain such a fulfilling personal life while growing such a massive organization.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you asked that because that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of is, I'll be celebrating 18 years married this year. I've got two young boys, well, 16 and 11. They're not so young anymore. And I didn't miss a ton, and I think what that from is I've made it a non-negotiable. I made it a non-negotiable that I was going to be home in time for dinner, that I was going to be at the baseball games, at the school events, at the things that mattered most. I wasn't going to miss those because I knew that those would be the things I would regret. And I want to have that feeling later in life that, ooh, I had accomplished all this like success, but at what cost? And so I just decided early on, I'm not a win at all costs sort of gal. I don't coach that way. I don't live that way. And I put what's most important to me first. And that's my wellness. I put my oxygen mask on first. That's my husband. I take care of our relationship second, and then my kids, because without my husband and I, there wouldn't have been the kids to begin with. So we kind of do things in that order. And I think I made a priority to figure out how to systemize my business so that I'm not working more than 40 hours a week. Heck, a lot of times I work 4 days a week. I'm off on Fridays. I'm getting a chance to do more things with my kids and things like that. We head to the desert, we ride quads, we go to the lake, we go wake surfing, all these things. And it's all because I've adopted this idea of life work harmony. And what I mean by that is I put life before work, and then I change the balance to harmony, because balance suggests equal weighting. And I don't know that it's always equal, but harmony means that I understand that there's seasons of life and that I'm going to keep harmonizing that to find the right mix for me.
I love that, and it's so important. I follow a lot of Ty Lopez's content, and the four pillars of life. He talks about health, wealth, love, happiness, and like you just said, there's different seasons for how those can affect your life, and finding the non-negotiables like you mentioned. And I think family is so important, and I see so many entrepreneurs and business owners, CEOs that they throw away the most important things in life because of their business, because they're unfortunately not able to put those systems in place early on, and they're working just crazy hours, and they have to make sacrifices, but it can be tough. So
Yeah, for sure.
appreciate you sharing that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I want to go into a few rapid fire questions, and then I'll leave some time for any last remarks. So the first one we have here is, what do you feel are the key attributes of a successful entrepreneur?
Patience, persistence, and playfulness. You have to have patience to see things through. You have to be persistent to kind of keep grinding, and then you have to be playful, because if you're not laughing, I mean, what's the point?
I love that playfulness, definitely, and that allows everybody to kind of bring out that comfortable side in them. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
What's something people think is important in business but doesn't matter that much?
Revenue. I would rather have a stronger profitable business than the big revenue business. I think there's a lot of belief that, grow revenue, grow number of employees, and I would rather keep something small and super profitable than have something big and not profitable.
Definitely. Last question. What is, the top three tips about business or, communication or anything that we talked about today, that you want your audience and our audience to walk away with?
Yeah. So the top three tips I would say is, there's two steps to behavior change. Step number one is self-awareness. You cannot change what you do not know. And step number two is self-regulation. Now that you know, what will you do about it? Right. So that's number one. The steps to behave, or two steps to change. Number two is I live by the philosophy of I never lose. I either win or I learn. And
Mhm.
so if I'm not specifically winning in my definition, I'm asking myself, what am I learning? Because I'm not going to lose, but I'm going to learn something. So I think that that's really important. And
Mhm.
then I think number three, I just learned from my roommate from college. She just sent out a Substack titled this, and I think it really drives home, is number three is laughing matters. You have to laugh and you have to have fun, because again, like, we just take things way seriously, and it causes heart disease and stress and overwhelm and heartache and all these things, and you can't take any of it with you at the end. So it's like, laugh a lot, hug the people you love, and just try to have as much fun as you can.
Yep. I know it's, a lot of people say, life's short, and it really is. And there's so many seasons that go by so quick. And at the end of the day, we're just borrowed time. So
We
to
really
really
are.
appreciate, what matters the most. And like you said, laughter, having joy, bringing out the best in others, that's going to really help you, as a business owner, CEO, or a janitor, whatever you are, that having those moments is so important. So,
Yeah.
but
Thank you.
yeah, where can people find you, Stacy?
Couple of places. So concilioteam.com is a great place. You can find me on LinkedIn. I put out a bunch of stuff there. And my book is coming out in a few months called Core Leadership. It's really for and about mid-level managers. And it talks all about these ideas that I shared here today. And that'll be on stacyMckibbin.com. So you'll be able to find me in a bunch of different places.
Awesome. Core leadership we'll put the link in when this goes live
Yay.
in a few weeks. So, and we'll definitely put the link to your socials as well, and your website, and your services, of course. So,
I appreciate it.
but yeah, I appreciate, you joining us today. And is there any, last remarks you want to make before we close out?
No, I think we covered it. I think I'm a big quote gal. So, I just be the change, be the change you wish to see in the world. It starts with you. And I think each one of us have the power within. It's just a matter of whether or not we tap into it. So the choice is yours.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, I appreciate it so much, Stacy, for being on Scaling Secrets, and I loved just learning about your journey and your different approaches, just to leadership, communication, really scaling a company and growing a company. So it was an honor to
Yeah.
have you.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. It was super fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this is another edition of Scaling Secrets. Till next time, guys.